السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala, in this session, continuing with Husn al-Khuluq or good manners, a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, that talks about a specific subject within Husn al-Khuluq, within the good manners. There's an ayah in the Quran where the ulama, they call it's the most comprehensive verse in defining husn al-khuluq or good manners with the people. And this ayah is in Surah Al-A'raf, verse number 199. Surah Al-A'raf, Surah number 7, verse number 99, which means, which says, خذ العفو وأمر بالعرف وأعرض عن الجاهلين. خذ العفو وأمر بالعرف وأعرض عن الجاهلين, which means take the afu, and the afu is the extra, from the people. That means don't go very critical with every right that you ask them for, but rather be at ease with it. Don't go in blaming others because they did not fulfill your rights, and so be kind to them. This is the kindness. And let me get the translation of the verse first. خذ العفو وأمر بالعرف وأعرض عن الجاهلين. It also means to be pardoning and to forgive. The translation of the ayah says, show forgiveness, enjoin what is good, and turn away from the foolish. It means do not punish them. So خذ العفو means pardon, forgive, and also take what is extra from the people. Take al-afu. If they are kind to you in a matter, just take that from them. Do not go after every single right that you deserve from them. And وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ, and enjoin what is known to be of goodness, whether it's a good speech or a good action. And this is to those who are close to oneself or those who are away, to basically be kind to them, righteousness to the parents, being good to others, giving a benefiting nasiha or a benefit to people, helping them in matters of righteousness and the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And since there's always going to be situations where ignorance would happen and people might treat you with ignorance, that's why the ayah says, وَأَعْرِضَ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ, turn away from the foolish ones. Don't be with every word that they say, with everything that they do, you oppose it with something equal or things like that. Just turn away from it, because life is much more precious than to be always concerned of winning battles that is no benefit. Unless, of course, there's a benefit. Unless there's a benefit to show goodness, to oppose evil. But this is in general the definition of what good manners are. So since this is mentioned, I wanted to talk about briefly some of the hadith that talks about al-afu. Al-afu, or pardoning or forgiveness, which is part of being a Muslim, is to pardon, is to forgive. And that's one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-afu, the one that pardons subhanahu wa ta'ala. So since this is not meant to be just talking in details about the subject, just some of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that mention this subject. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, in the hadith in Sahih Muslim, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he said, قالت حبيبة رضي الله عنها, حبيبة رضي الله عنها, she said, اللهم متعني بزوجي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وبأبي أبي سفيان وبأخي معاوية. She said, oh Allah, متعني, make me enjoy, and continue to have the enjoyment of having the presence of my husband Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and with the presence of my father Abu Sufyan, and with my brother Muawiyah. Basically making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that she would live long and they would live long, so that they would have a goodly life together. Because as we know, death, when takes people apart, It's one of the masayib, one of the calamities, especially when people love one another. So the Prophet والسلام, he said to her, إنك سألت الله لأجال مضروبة وآثار موطوءة وأرزاق مقسومة. You asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to ajal, limits in this time that is already fixed, and traces that is going to be taken, footsteps that is going to be taken, and arzaq and provisions that is going to be distributed anyway. That means you're asking about something that is already decreed. لا يعجل منها شيئا قبل حله. Nothing will come closer or before it's decreed for it to come. ولا يؤخر منها شيئا بعد حله. And nothing will be delayed after it's already been decreed to come before. And then he said, ولو سألت الله أن يعافيك من عذاب في النار وعذاب في القبر لكان خيرا لك. He said, if you asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah yu'afiyaki, and this is one of the meaning of al-afu. That means that Allah would save you, pardon you from the punishment of the fire and the punishment of the grave, it would have been better for you. And of course, the hadith doesn't mean that we don't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for provisions in this life and for goodly life and so on, because there is رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. But the Prophet ﷺ directed her towards more benefiting. You know, no matter how long a person lives, there is going to be an end to this life. And when a person's life ends, all of the long life that he lived, it doesn't really matter to him at the moment of death. So when a person thinks that, you know, he lived longer and he wants to live longer, at the end, it all the same. Everybody is the same when it comes to facing the moment of death. So what really matters is, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that a person is saved, pardoned from the punishment of the fire and the punishment of the grave. And this is the real happiness and this is the real joy. So the subject of al-afu, or pardoning, to be pardoned, because if a person is ordered to pardon others, to forgive others, we need to think of our own forgiveness, to be forgiven, to be pardoned. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. Don't you love that Allah would forgive you? So forgive others so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also would forgive you. So pardoning others and pardoning and seeking pardoning and forgiveness for oneself. This is basically something that a person should be upon. We know the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when Aisha radiallahu anha, she asked the Prophet ﷺ, if it's Laylatul Qadr, what should I say? He said, say, Allahumma innaka afuun tuhibbul afwa fa'afu an. And this is a beautiful dua, not just in Laylatul Qadr, but in general at all times. There's a hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Inna al-ansara karshi wa aibati, wa inna al-nasa sayakthuruna wa yaqillun, faqbalu min muhsinihim wa'afu an musi'ihim. That means that al-ansar, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam was giving the wasiyah to the ansar, the people of al-Medina, that they are my people, they are the closest to me, they are the special people to me. And the people in general will be lots of numbers, will be less in number. So that means people will be so much in number and the Ansar will be less. فَقْبَلُوا مِن مُحْسِنِهِمْ. So therefore accept from their good doers, وَعَفُوا عَن مُسِيئِهِمْ, and pardon their wrongdoer. You know, that means, and this is part of خُذِ الْعَفُ. Take the extras. That means accept from the people their good doing and pardon the wrongdoer, and the pardoning that it brings goodness, not the pardoning that brings more and more into disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and turning away and ghafla and forgetfulness from matters of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, and this hadith in Sunan Abi Dawood and others, and Shaykh Ibrahim rahimahullah authenticated it, hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhuma, that the Prophet ﷺ said, تعافوا فيما بينكم تعافوا فيما بينكم فما بلغني من حد فقد وجب. تعافوا فيما بينكم, that means pardon with one another. تعافوا from al-af in the plural tense. That means you should observe al-af or pardoning فيما بينكم among yourselves. Pardon one another, forgive one another. فما بلغني من حد فقد وجب. But if a sin that necessitates a punishment reaches me, فقد وجب, that means it becomes mandatory to apply the punishment. And this is not just to the Prophet ﷺ, but basically to the people of authority, which is it's a huge subject, and it's a great principle in the life of the believers. Meaning that if someone did something to you that by law that person can be in trouble, you can get him into easy, to the system, and you can get him imprisoned, you can get him fined, you can get whatever you want with the law, because he transgressed the limits, he did something wrong. If you can pardon, do so. And pardon one another. Do not go after people to sue them, to get your right from them exactly the way that you expect. Just pardon one another. But if something reaches the authority, then they have to apply the orders of Allah. And of course, even the judge in many cases would ask people to pardon one another, to forgive one another. So this is a great principle in dealing with one another. Yes, a person is not to be blamed if he asks for his rights, but if he's able to get his rights. If he gets more, then that's not permissible. But what's better on a higher level is to pardon one another. Even if someone, for example, as Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah, it was mentioned that one time they caught a thief that was trying to steal from his place. And when he got to know the person, he got to see that he was in need. He pardoned him. He did not hand him over to the authorities, and he even gave charity to him. Right? So, it's not a call for people to be loose, to allow criminals to commit more crimes, but rather to be more merciful towards others, to pardon if you have the means to pardon, to forgive if that's forgiveness will bring goodness. And that's, as they say, as one of the Salaf, they said, what's very spacious is pardoning and forgiving. Meaning that first, when someone, and this is how to deal with things, and this is part of good manners, if someone did harm to you, don't think first of getting your rights. Don't think first that you want to revenge, that you've been hurt, that you want your rights back, you want your honor and things like this. No, don't think that way first. The first thing that you should think of is there room for forgiveness? Can I forgive? Can I pardon? Is it something that is going to bring benefit? And this can be, a person can know that by assessing the situation, by asking the people of knowledge, by looking closer into the matter. But this is the first step. This is the first thing for a person to look into and to examine this thoroughly. And if there is a chance, there's a way to forgive and to pardon, and this is a good thing, definitely a person should do so. And if this is not a good idea, because based on knowledge, based on what the reality of the situation, then there's nothing wrong for a person to ask for justice. But we have to be extremely careful. And that's why to ask for justice, it's very tight. It's not as spacious as forgiveness. Very tight, meaning that you have to be very careful, because it's very easy to fall into injustice and wrongdoing, because you're only entitled to your rights and not even one hair more. Right? It has to be exactly what you have been wronged, and not even anything more. If you do anything more, then that's wrongdoing. Then you become a wrongdoer. Then you become an unjust person. So you end up yourself being a sinful person, and there is something of a burden of a sin upon oneself. Sometimes people, they have authorities, the court will give them more what they deserve, things like this. And that's why if a person is not able to do or to get the justice the right way, then there is spaciousness in pardoning and forgiving. And that's why for many cases when people don't have authorities and there is injustice committed against them, either they would do wrongdoing because they have no authority, and the authority is not on their side, for example. Then if that's the case, then pardon, so that you don't fall into injustices as a result of retaliation without any proper way to do so. And as it's been also reported from Sunan Abi Dawood, and it's a sound narration, from Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma. He said, a man came to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, kam na'fu an al-khadim? He said, O Messenger of Allah, how many times should we pardon the servant? So the Prophet ﷺ was silent. ثم أعاد عليه الكلام. Then the man repeated the question again. So the Prophet ﷺ was silent. فلما كان في الثالثة, and when he asked the third time, the Prophet ﷺ said to him, اعفو عنه في كل يوم 70 مرة. Pardon the servant every day 70 times. And again, this is a sound hadith. Isnad of it is Hasan. 70 times. And 70 to the Arabs is not meant for specifically the number, but it's like the highest number that you can think of. And if you want to say, when you say to someone, I said it 100 times or million times, 70 times, that means a lot of times. And this is to show the importance of pardoning and forgiving. And this is again with the dua, Allahumma innaka afuun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anni. And this is the word al-afiyah. Allahumma inni as'aluka al-afiyah. If you remember the hadith of the dua, that is consisted of one word. One of the most virtuous, one of the most important dua to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to ask Allah for al-afiyah. As the Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ taught him this, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for al-afiyah, because he would never be given something after al-iman, al-yaqeen, and certainty better than al-afiyah. The strength, and that's one of the meanings of al-afiyah. The strength in all matters, to be away from all harm, things like this. And that's why the al-afwa al-afiyah are mentioned in the morning and in the evening. And this is a dua that we should never miss every morning and every evening, part of the adhkar that we say in the morning and in the evening. And the Prophet ﷺ used to say that in the morning and in the evening, as reported by in Sunan Abi Dawud and others, and it's a sound hadith. Where the Prophet ﷺ, as the hadith says, لم يكن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يدع هؤلاء الدعوات. The Prophet ﷺ would never miss these du'as حين يمسي وحين يصبح, when the night comes and in the morning. What is this dua? Allahumma inni as'aluka al-afiyah. Allahumma inni as'aluka al-afiyata fi dunya wal-akhirah. Oh Allah, I ask you al-afiyah, strength in this dunya and the hereafter. Allahumma inni as'aluka al-afwa wal-afiyata fi dini wa dunyaya wa ahli wa mali. Oh Allah, I ask you al-afw, pardoning, al-afw, wal-afiyah, and strength in my deen, in my dunya, with my family, with regards to one's family and one's wealth. وَمَالِي. Allahumma astur awrati. Oh Allah, conceal my awra, my faults basically. وَآمِن rawati, and secure my terrifying things, that protect me from being terrified. Allahumma ahfazni min bayni yadayya wa min khalfi. Oh Allah, guard me, guide, protect me from in front of me and from behind. وعن يميني وعن شمالي, and from my right side and from my left side, and ومن فوقي, and from above me. وأعوذ بعظمتك أن أغتال من تحتي, and I seek refuge in your greatness that I would be attacked from underneath me, meaning to be killed or the like of this. Right? So this is a beautiful dua that we should say every morning and every evening. So this is to be said every morning and every evening. We even know that in part of the deen, which is, I'm not sure how it applies in other ways of justice system. In the justice system, in the deen of Islam, Sharia, when someone kills someone else, it's up to the family. It's not a state versus the accused, where usually they don't pardon anyone. Right? It's the rights of the family of the deceased. They can forgive and pardon. So when the killing is something that is, the punishment of it is death, it's, no doubt about it and so on, then it's up to the family if, whether they forgive, and if they forgive, they would take the blood money or even forgive that, or they would ask for retaliation. And even the judge or so, he would call the people to forgive and to pardon. So this is there. This is part of the system, and that means the person will be pardoned. Otherwise, if they don't, then the punishment is to be applied. And there's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, part of the hadith, وَمَا زَادَ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا بِعَفْوٍ إِلَّا عِزَّةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not increase a slave by his pardoning except honor and dignity. Meaning that if you pardon, Allah will increase your izzah, your honor and dignity. Why? Because when people, what's the main thing that stops people from pardoning or forgiving is that they think that they will be humiliated. They will be taken advantage of. So the hadith comes against this thinking or this doubt that a person would have, that no, if you pardon for the sake of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase your honor and dignity and not to be humiliated whatsoever. So this is a great promise. That if a person do that for the sake of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not make people treat him with humiliation. It's the opposite of that. And there's so many hadith, even with the meanings of people forgiving and pardoning one another and things like this. Even the Prophet ﷺ, when he entered Mecca, and he forgave everyone there and no punishments and things like this. And he said, رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِقَوْمِ فَإِنَّهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Allah pardon my people because they do not know. So this is a great manner that people need to observe and not to go always after their rights and to revenge and things of that nature. طيب, barakallahu fikum. Inshallah, the next class is going to be talking about the objectives. I mean, the next class meaning in 2 minutes, inshallah. Inshallah, we'll talk about the objectives of the surahs of the last juz. The entire juz, inshallah. One surah after the other, just a sentence for every surah, inshallah. The objective of every surah, inshallah ta'ala, as the last session in this third course, inshallah. And then tomorrow we will start the new one from Surah Qaf till Surah Amma Yatasa'alun, inshallah. So we'll see you there, inshallah, after 2-3 minutes, inshallah. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, baraka Muhammad wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.